second one having to do with finance. The third area having to do with human resources. The fourth area having to do with policies. And curriculum. A section on curriculum. So those were the 5 areas that we were asked to take a look at. In August, we submitted our final report to the Mr. Denali. Since Tim is not going to be here, Matt, who works for Tim, is going to cover some things with you regarding student data, academic achievement data.
Good morning. Share Matthew so share touching Kaba Bashichin, Kitachini Nationalishi Nashe, Teraganda Nashamando, and Teraganda, yes and Nasha. And I presently work as a legislative analyst with the Department of Education. And I'm also a part of this whole study team. And I'm here to provide the background about why we're going through all of this and to explain just to provide information in contrast to a lot of the stuff that's being said out there that is not exactly true. So this is trying to explain why we're going through all of this and why everybody's all scared. Like on June 1st, the nomination is going to take over schools, which is that's probably not going to happen because that's a long process. But this information right here, it's about trying to educate the public, educating people about why we're going through all of this. And the bottom line at the end of the day, it's about improving outcomes, improving student achievement. And this information helps explain why we're going through all of this. So I'll just get right to it. But there are 2 separate parts of this involved. One is called the DOTI, the feasibility study, which is going to be presented by our team. And the other part that's tied to it is called the Sovereignty and Indian Education Grant, which are all related, they're all connected to each other. And coming right to it, the background, right now there are a lot of rumors, a lot of stuff being said about this whole plan, about what the navigation is trying to do, what DOTI is trying to do. And one of the comments is, all of this just happened just this past year, it happened overnight. Actually, this whole process, the feasibility study, the Sovereignty and Education Grant, the blueprint for reform, all this stuff, it's actually been a process of ongoing discussion that has been going back for the past couple of years, 3 years. And some of the comments and feedback that we received, navigation was actually part of. Right now, there's a lot of misinformation that says that local schools, communities were not consulted, we were left out, we were left in the dark, and this would be done behind closed doors. Actually, DOTI, in partnership with BIE, scheduled a series of public hearings all across the navigation, in Crown Point, in Chinle, at all these different schools, and we tried to involve as many of our schools and communities in this whole process. Because right now, there's a lot of misinformation being said that this is done without our knowledge or consent or behind closed doors, which is not the truth. And based on a lot of those comments and feedback that were received at every one of these consultations, not just one just in Navajo, but nationally, and Navajo's obviously we're a big part of the whole national picture. A lot of that was eventually formed into what's called a blueprint for reform and secretarial order that eventually became what's known as the blueprint for reform and the secretarial order. So a lot of this has national implications about what we're trying to do, about how do we improve outcomes for students. And so a lot of those comments, a lot of those discussions eventually formed the basis of proceeding with the feasibility study, which is going to be presented, and the other part, which is related, which is the Sovereignty and Indian Education Grant. And again, one of the things that's important to remember about these consultations, the comments, is how do we build a high-quality education system for our children that's based on what tribes, and in this case, what Navajo Nation wants. And that's what this feasibility study, the Sovereignty Grant, what all of this is about is how do we build a Navajo education system based on what the nation wants. And the other part is Navajo Nation is one of 5 tribes in the country, and there are a lot of tribes in the country that were awarded a series of grants totaling between $100,000 and $200,000. Navajo Nation, we received a grant for $200,000, and that grant is going to be for 2 years. This year is going to be our first allocation, and we hopefully will get a second allocation next year. But the money is intended to help develop a game plan for the next 2 years. So all this stuff being said about the nation on July 1st is going to take over every school, that discussion is a long way off. And so the part of this process is that we have to look at every aspect of what it's going to take if Navajo Nation is going to build and take on an education system for itself. We have to look about every issue, every detail, if we're going to eventually take that step. So, and this is not something that's going to happen overnight, or as a lot of the misinformation or has been said, which is July 1st, the nation's going to take over every school. No, it's trying to develop a plan based on what the Navajo Nation wants. And the bottom line, what this whole process is, it's about improving educational outcomes for students on Navajo Nation, whether it's with VIP operating schools, and of course, that a lot of them feed back into public schools. It's also about developing a plan with the feasibility study, the sovereignty grant, about trying to improve efficiencies with their schools in the best interest of students. And the other, again, as I mentioned, it's building an education system based on what the nation wants, a high quality, highly effective education system. And again, it all goes back to stuff that has been going on for the past 3 years. And a lot of the misinformation that's being said is this just happened this past year. It's actually been an ongoing process of collecting feedback and input that formed a couple plans at the national level that have come back down to us. And so if you think about it, what we're trying to do here is build an education system based on what the Navajo Nation wants, and improving outcomes for students. And to give you more background about the sovereignty and education grant, it's right there. It's based on a couple laws. One of the most important laws is Public Law 100-297, which is called the Tribally Controlled Schools Act. And then we have another law where we have one contract school, which is Public Law 93-638. And the goal of all this is how do we build a high-quality, highly effective Navajo education system with the goals of improving outcomes, revitalization of language and culture, improving efficiencies, and of course, building the capacity of the nation to be able to work effectively and serve schools. And the sovereignty grant is going to occur over the next 2 years, and we hope to get started, at least in the process, starting sometime in January. And it's going to cover all those 4 different areas that the feasibility study is going to talk about regarding human resources, finance, academics, curriculum, and so on. And the primary goal of all of this is how do we build a school reform plan in this whole process for students. And some of these are the expected outcomes of what we're trying to get through all of this for. One is to improve academic outcomes for students, to reduce the high job applicant, to give students college the skills they need to be successful beyond high school, beyond schools. And this is just to explain the situation that exists in detail with what we deal with on a day-to-day basis with the schools that operate under the authorization of the Navajo Nation, which are the tribally controlled schools, the grant schools. That would involve schools like Rock Point or Rough Rock, some of these schools. And this is based on the years of experience that we've had working with a lot of schools, what we've seen, what we've observed about some of the different challenges that exist. And some people say that this information is meant to say that things are bad or make them look bad. But the thing about this is it's about educating the public about the challenges that we face as far as what impacts student outcomes. And one of the big problems off the back is that when you talk about Navajo education, we deal with a highly fragmented education system. Right now, the Navajo Nation oversees and authorizes 34 tribally controlled schools, grant schools. And if you think about it, each of these schools operates as their own little mini school district. And I'll put that picture up to illustrate it. So in this case, you have 34 different little independent school districts, each with their own superintendent or person that's in charge of the school, their own school administration. You have the HR system. Some schools have a curriculum, some others do not. Whether or not it's aligned to standards, that's a big, big question. When it comes to hiring, you have hiring practices that are all over the place. There's little to no uniformity or consistency. Teacher evaluations. Some schools have them, some schools don't. Sometimes, in some cases, schools use teacher evaluations that are also the same as the ones they use for cooks, bus drivers, and secretaries. And so the system we have is one where each school is moving in different directions. And the best description that can be thought of here is it's almost like a herding cat, because each school is moving in different directions. And there are also a lot of different schools, like school administrations and school boards, all with their own little agendas, different plans in place. And when you look at the outcomes, which are test scores, you have schools that are all over the place. There's almost little to no uniformity or consistency. And a lot of what we're seeing within our school systems is a lot of these problems are evident within school audits. You have schools that have severe or significant deficiencies, findings. You have a lot of these issues that definitely do come up. There's also high rates of employee turnover with some of our schools. And then when you add it to this picture, I mean, this right now is just the picture that addresses grant schools. But then in this case, you now have BIE, which is a whole separate system, a whole different creation or animal in this case. And then you have public schools. And then you have some of these other schools that they operate all on their own. But this is, at least with the overall pictures with some of our own schools that operate under the authority of the nation, grant schools in particular. And these are some of the other challenges that exist with Navajo education. One is student achievement is really low. And we'll eventually get to some of the charts that convey what that looks like. There are also a lot of schools with severe school governance programs. You have school boards that really get involved in day-to-day administration. They don't like someone, they fire people. They have a lot of teacher turnover. And so you have schools that exist where that seems to be the case. And then you have a lot of local politics. Well, one of the things that we've observed with a lot of grad schools is because they happen to be the single largest employer for the community, they oftentimes they become almost like an employment agency for relatives or members of school board. And so a lot of that stuff that happens in the community, the politics, the negativity, it oftentimes goes back into our schools. And then when you have an environment like that happening, it goes into it also has an impact on what happens in the classroom with student achievement. And so when you have schools or school systems where you have a highly politicized system that has a lot of issues, student achievement becomes almost like the last thing on the priority list of people, of students in that respect. Student achievement is really not important because it's more about what the adults want. It's about what I want, what the people that are in charge of the school are more concerned about is the power, the politics, the money. Student achievement, last thing. And that's a little bit concerning, and we hope to change that.